it's very difficult to provide a recommendation for what the consortium should do to consolidate the Canadian market. As of course they're no doubt familiar with, Canada is a very strange market with a few liquor boards. You have the BCLDB, you have the SAQ, the LCBO, and Alberta, which is a private market. So it's very difficult to recommend ways that they should be able to consolidate the market. But I think the most important thing is that the wines do speak for themselves. The quality is there, and consumers do appreciate good wine. So I think the consortium is doing as much as can be done by giving opportunities for the consortium to come together, to arrange these tastings, get them in front of the trade, buyers, the media, the influencers, and allow the wines to show. The Canadian consumer is very willing to spend money on quality wines. Our domestic production of wine is very, very small, and so we're not afraid to import or to enjoy good wines from other countries. Value is always a concern, and the Canadian consumer is generally happy to spend a reasonable amount of money on good quality wines. A wine like Brunello, of course, with being very small production, very scarce in our market, there are always going to be consumers out there looking for these wines and not afraid to pay a little bit more for Reservas, Brunello de Montalcino, even Rosso de Montalcino, that are great quality wines that are, certainly the quality is there.
My name is Scott Winograd. I am a sommelier and a food beverage manager at the Calgary Winter Club. I just had the pleasure of tasting the 2010 Brunellos, both on their own and in a structured tasting as well as with food. And what really stood out to me is they have a fantastic acidity, all of them, all the ones I tasted, and that acidity, of course, with food especially really works. Other things that stood out, I noticed that you could really categorize the Brunellos as either being very feminine or very masculine. They were very definably different. I think they really showcased the winemaking style from the different producers as well. Brunello on a Canadian market is it's always a real gem and it's a real treat. Canadian market right now is perhaps going from a Brunello market to a Rosso market right now because of the economy. But those Brunellos are certainly a treat. They're drinking beautifully now, I noticed as well. Very approachable. Some of them were open a bit longer than others, but all the fruit was there, all the balance was there. That acidity I mentioned, combined with the tannins, just made a really balanced, approachable wine. Not overly tannic, which Brunellos in the past have been when they're quite young. The fruit was there for sure. However, because of all the acidity and that tannic structure, I believe that these 2010s are going to go for a long, long time. Noticeably, especially the feminine styles of Brunello, I think with that acidity, it's going to stretch the longevity of those wines out much longer than Brunellos have in the past. So, the 2010s, especially introducing to this market, are perfect because they're so approachable in their youth. Consumers tend to buy wines to drink that day, and buying Brunellos is always tough for that type of consumer because they're quite tannic and pretty closed if the consumer doesn't know how to really handle or drink the wine properly. But when you have a great vintage like this, they are much more approachable, and I think it speaks well to the future of Brunello in this market if consumers are enjoying those wines today.
I think that people are more and more interested in wine because wine isn't historically a Canadian product. And as we educate ourselves more and we become more interested, the idea of having a greater selection, learning about traditional wines. I know Italy, obviously arguably the first, if not second, producer in the world of wines. I think it'll get a lot of attention. And I think Brunello has that sexiness and has that appeal that people really want to put on the table when they're having guests over. So I think it's only going to be a better market going forward.
think that the Canadian consumer, or here in Alberta, is changing, and do you think that the consortium of Brunello is aware of that change and they are somehow corresponding to the change in the consumer?
I think definitely the consumer is changing. I think the challenge Brunello or any traditional Italian or French marketing has is they haven't met the expectations of the Canadian consumer as far as packaging. But I think the Canadian consumer is learning more and more about the regions, and I think it's only going to get stronger for Brunello as we look at that, especially with people exploring other varietals, Brunello's at the top of their list of things they want to learn about.
What kind of consumers, based on your experience, are the ones that buy Brunello here?
I think in specifically in Alberta, and actually in Canada in general, the consumer here is twofold. You have one that have a high level of disposable income, and they look at wine as a level of status. They enjoy it, but it's a very much a luxury item for them. And then you have an ever-growing world of what we call wine geeks, and these are people that are all about the wine, and they are just a growing and growing group. And the appeal to them for something like Brunello, because it is a very, what's the word, limited market, limited production. It's a very small region, has a lot of rich history, and I think it has a very high appeal to the wine geek group. So between the wine geek group and then your luxury product, I think there's a lot of attention for the area.
So do you think they would most likely buy it in a restaurant or buy it in a wine store and take home to drink?
I think both. I think you'll see a lot more in the mid and high tier restaurants. You'll see an increase in sales in Brunello in that area because people know the name. There's so many grapes from Italy that are obscure in our market. We're not familiar with them. But Sangiovese and Brunello, people are familiar with them, they're comfortable with them, and they're willing to spend that money on it. And I think that's a big thing. There's that trust in the marketplace. They know what their expectation is met, and they know what they'll get. My name's Tim Mitchell. I am a wine importer and sommelier here in Canada, in Calgary, Alberta.
Would you like to tell us something about the 2010 vintage? What do you think of it? How do you evaluate it? Which characteristics are the most significant to you?
I think it's going to be a really good year from what we tasted this morning. It was definitely a big change. I think it's going to be a pretty stellar year, and I think it's something that people should hold on to and should look forward to as being something special.
Thank you. What expectations do you have for this vintage of Brunello?
From what we've been experiencing so far, I think this is one of those vintages in our market that will allow people who don't traditionally drink Brunello, they'll be interested in it because it's such a stellar vintage, because people are interested in it, and because people are talking about it. I think it'll attract more attention to the region and to the grape.